Hi everyone, this is Mike Matsuno. Is anybody out there? How is the audio and video? If any of you are listening out there, could you answer in the comments? Just wanted to make sure that the audio and video is going okay. I want to thank you for joining us today. Just this is a little bit different from what I normally would do. I usually talk about traveling today, but today I'm going to talk a little bit about what I admire about Japan. So, if anyone could at least just put in the comments whether you can hear. Is the audio okay? The video okay? You don't see any tracks, like, sometimes you see like tracks coming out of the hands. No? Okay. So, want to say hi to all of you for joining us today. This is the Discover Japan Live number 3. And if you don't know me, I'm Mike Matsuno. I'm originally from Honolulu, Hawaii. I'm a Japanese American, Yonsei. And audio is low. Okay, thank you for letting me know. Audio is low. Maybe I have to speak a little bit louder. How's that, Ario? Is this better if I speak a little bit louder? Okay. Sorry, I got it up as high as I can. I guess I should bring it closer to me. How's this, Ario? Is this better? So, again, I'll speak a little louder. I'm not sure why it's giving me a little bit of a problem. Test, 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 test. How's this? Is this a little bit better? Okay. So, anyway, I was saying that if you don't know me, I'm Mike Matsuno. I'm originally from Honolulu, Hawaii. I'm Japanese American. I'm a fourth generation, which means my great grandparents originally came from Hiroshima about 130 years ago. And I have lived and worked in Japan for over 30 years. Worked, lived, studied, and okay, thank you, Aryo. And I have a Man in Japan channel, and part of that is to do maybe a live. I wanted to reach out to some of the viewers because a lot of people had questions about Japan, about travel. My first Discover Japan number 1 and number 2 were about traveling in Japan, and then today I thought I'd do something a little bit different, and so it's more about what I appreciate about Japan. And I thought this was interesting for people who visit or people who want to come and live in Japan. I even heard there are some people who want to actually retire in Japan. I'm not sure how the visa would work on that, but for those of you who are just interested in, Japan itself, today is about my opinion about why I really like Japan and why I'm still here. Um, so to continue on here, what I also wanted to say is that if you have any questions or comments, please put them into the comment box. Please get onto the live chat because that's really helpful if you have questions that I can answer, because I want to involve everyone if possible, at least to either answer the questions. If I can't answer the questions, there are other people in the chat who will answer the questions if they have the experience or they know. Like last week we had that going on with, I think, Mad Hatta and Ibrahim and things. We had people who actually answered the questions. So there are some questions that I don't know the answers to, as well as I think some people who are younger than me probably have a maybe different and maybe a better perspective on some things. So if you could join us in the comments, if you have any comments or you have any questions or you just want to say hello, please do so. Okay, thank you, Ario. Okay, so before I get into today's topic, I wanted to share with you a short story about my life. Okay, so I was at the university, many many moons ago, and our university, Willamette University, had an exchange program with ICC, which is a Japanese university, and most of my friends and my fraternity brothers were all going on that. They take 25 a year, but I didn't want to go on that because one, I look Japanese. I'm Japanese American. My idea was if I want to do a study abroad, I want to go someplace where is a real study abroad, right? I didn't want to go to Japan where I thought that there'd be a lot of people who look like me and just like in America, which was my thoughts and expectations. So I didn't apply for that program our junior year, and I applied for a AIFS program to go study in Kenya at the University of Nairobi. I thought, okay, this would be a real kind of study abroad, study in Africa, study Swahili 101. There were some classes that I wanted to take. So anyway, I signed up for that and I sent in the $25, which was the application fee. And then I was getting excited. It was already, I think it was like May, around April. And so I was waiting to hear. All my friends were going to Japan, and I was planning to go to Africa, Kenya, for a real study abroad. So I thought, well, anyway, when it got close to May, there was a phone call from the AIFS office, and they said, really sorry to tell you that the program was canceled. And I said, oh, what happened? And they said, well, you need at least 6 people. And then I said, well, how many applied? And they said, oh, only you, one. And so I, there was nothing I could say. I was the only applicant, right? And I guess not many people wanted to go to Kenya at that time. So they said they would refund my $25. And then there I was. I was kind of sulking because already it was the end of the year and I wanted to go away for my junior year. All my friends were going abroad. Some were going to Costa Rica, others were going to Japan. And so finally I decided, well, I got to do something. And so I asked if I could still apply to get onto the Japan program. The deadline had already finished, but it was the school's program. So there was a lot more latitude. So I went to ask, and then they said, yes, it's still open. So that's how I ended up coming to Japan. It wasn't a choice. It was shikata ga nai. I had no choice, that I went because I wanted to go somewhere. And that's how it started. And I wasn't excited about coming to Japan because I wanted to go to Africa, right? So, but anyway, I tried to get myself a little bit more positive about Japan. Of course, my expectations were completely different. But so then anyway, I did come back in the late 1970s, 1979, I think it was. And when I came, everything was different. Everything just blew my mind. And here I was, just in a place that was magical in a sense that everything around was different. The food was different, everything, And so even if the people look like me or I look like them, everything was different. And so there was that moment in my life that I go, oh my goodness, this is a completely different world. And that was the start of my relationship, of course, of coming to like Japan, and it wasn't always easy, and I didn't speak Japanese at the time, but that was the start, So today I'm gonna talk to you about, after 30 years, what I find to be what I admire about Japan, and I'm not gonna talk about the typical things that most people will usually say, like, oh, we like Japanese architecture or pop culture or anime or geisha or maiko-san or food or video. I'm going to talk about a couple of things to me that are really, really important. I mean, even deeper than that. More about qualities of Japan or the Japanese people, I think are really the base of why people really come to really like and love Japan. So, not everything in Japan is easy. Even after 30 years, I still struggle with a lot. In fact, I think I'm going to do another live in 3 weeks, July 7th, about what frustrates me about Japan. Kind of be the opposite of this. But today it's about what I really admire about Japan. And first is, and I've mentioned this before in the Discover Japan 1 and 2, is safety and low crime. That's really what I think is probably one of the most important things. Like single women can walk alone at night, even late at night, the last train. You see young children on the train, like I see some, like sometimes almost, I think, too young, like 5 years old, 7 years old, with their uniform, catching the train by themselves. And it's like, it's in America, you would never ever do that. So, but again, but generally it's overall it's safe, so children can go to school on their own. They can walk home usually by themselves. Yes, there have been a couple incidents where some children have got hit by a car and things, but it's rarely where someone is coming and abducting a child or something. So still there's that idea that it's still quite safe. Any large city, Tokyo, Osaka, even in the red light districts, like if you go to Shinjuku, Kabukicho, you feel a little bit not scared, but you look around and you see some characters, and you do have some of those scammers. You hear about those scammers, right? So sometimes you have those guys standing out there with these real big posters of pretty girls or young girls, and they're trying to lure people in to come in and to drink Be very, very careful. I wouldn't even go because a lot of times there are like the scams. They'll get you in there, and then some of the ladies will order drinks. You have to buy them drinks, and the drinks are like $100 each or whatever. And you don't even realize by the end of the night you're ending up spending, like your bill is like $3,000 or whatever. You see that there's some YouTube videos about that. So those scammers are there. But again, they're standing outside. No one is literally forcing you. If you go in, it's kind of on your own choice. So again, although they have these scammers, it's not like you feel like you're in bodily danger or anything. I mean, if you really think about it, the United States population is what, 330 million? Japan is about 127 million. So it's about a 2.5 ratio, right? 2.5 more people in the United States. But if it comes to like number of murders, America's about 17 times more, murders than in Japan. So again, yes, there is murder in Japan. Yes, there is crime, but it's at a much less amount. If you look at like theft, robbery, and like fraud, when I looked up some of the data on that, there were like 4.6 million cases in the United States. In Japan, had like 407,000. That's about 100 times difference. And a lot of the Japanese theft is like, I think 20% was bicycle theft. A lot of you who have been to Japan, on the bicycles, right? You see them, they have those kind of like those keys and things. Hi, Madhata. Hi, Star. Thanks for joining us. And then it looks so easy to steal. It is kind of easy to steal or break the lock, right? So 20% is that kind. I'm sure a lot of it is like drunk people stealing someone's bike because they didn't want to walk home. But anyway, that's 20%. 30% is shoplifting. But in American style robbery is like heavy duty, right? Especially recently in the last year, you saw those people go into those stores, Walmart and whatever, and just take everything. So very different type of, even if you compare the cases, the Japanese cases are still not at the level of violence and big crime like in the United States. So, and even like sometimes people talk about the Yakuza, and I have never encountered the Yakuza, but normally the police know where the Yakuza are, the Yakuza know where the police are, and it's kind of like everybody knows where a lot of times where people are, and there's a kind of, I don't want to say respect, but there's a kind of balance in that people know. So again, yes, they'll be down in the red light districts and things. Yes, they're the ones who peddle the drugs and things. But again, unless you really kind of go looking for it, it's not like coming out to you or whatever. So I still feel Japan is still really very safe, and so it's still a really nice place. Of course, one of the best places. And there was once when, and the reason that I really came to understand this idea of safety was when long ago I was studying in Guatemala. I was studying Spanish for 3 months. I wanted to learn Spanish, and in Guatemala, the rule of law is basically it's the law of the jungle. So you really got to fend for yourself. And it was there that you always had to have a plan. Like if you were robbed, what would you give them? Where you put money in one pocket, I put money in my shoe. So at least if even I gave them the money, I would be able to pay a taxi or come home or something. So you always had to think about crime, and you were always on high tension, and you were going walking. Even when we were hiking up to the volcano, we had to always be like worry that people get robbed or or mugged along the way up or down. So we had to hire a guide, and hopefully he would protect us or make sure we got to there, which we did. There was no problem for us. But again, all the people around me, the other tourists that were studying Spanish, maybe what 20-30% of them had gotten robbed, or or their backpacks were cut. So that's where I realized when I was in Guatemala was that safety is, to me, the most important thing. And that's where Japan has going for it. It is probably one of the safest countries in the world for such a large population of 127 million people. I mean, when you think about it, even the United States, when I was going to the United States for conferences and things, like the big cities, LA, Philadelphia, Memphis, Washington, D.C., downtown is a lot of times where they have the big convention centers or in that area. And when you go down there, you always have to kind of be on, especially if you're wearing a suit, right? Because you're kind of like a target. But you're always watching, like, where you walk. You don't want to stop, because if you stop at the traffic light, you want to keep moving, because a homeless or a panhandler might come up to you and start asking for money. And you're always like on. That kind of stress is, to me, quite tiring, I think. And that's why I really, I enjoy Japan is that none of that in Japan. I never felt ever that I was at any kind of bodily harm or I had to worry about someone stealing or mugging me. Even in the late nights in Kabukicho, I mean, you gotta still be careful, but I never felt that kind of like I feel like in the United States where I'm always on where you park your car, what area you're driving into. You always gotta be on, right? And I hear like now, especially in like San Francisco, they're getting, like there's a lot of breaking ins and crime, whether it's the drugs, or the opioids, or whatever. So anyway, getting back to my point, the point is basically is that people are just, it's basically a very safe country. So, um, in fact, once I was at Washington D.C. for a conference, NAFSA conference, and I was catching an early morning plane, and what the news said on the television was 6 hours, six murders. In Japan, when a murder happens, one murder somewhere in the country, NHK will cover it, the news, and everybody will hear about it through Japan. But it's only one murder. It's not every day. It's such a big and unusual occurrence that it's advertised, or not advertised, but it's reported throughout the whole entire country. So it's something that's not really common, and that's what I truly love and admire about Japan. So that's number one. Number two is customer service. As many of you who have been to Japan, like I know a lot of people on here, they have been to Japan. I don't think anywhere in the world can match the level of customer service in Japan. If you think so, and there is a country that you have had better service, please write it in the comments because I'm curious to know. I would like to go there. Um, I always believe that the Japanese are very professional, they're very polite, and they have very good hospitality. They have their word, omotenashi. Omotenashi means no front, basically, directly translated. Basically, it means that the customer is king, or the customer is, always right. Same like sometimes we say in the United States, the customer is always right. And they try to do everything to make the guest feel welcome and valued. But the idea of like high level American guest services and Japan is still a little bit different. In the United States, for example, Nordstrom's model, and even a friend of ours, a friend of a friend of ours, she was the vice president of Northwest Airlines before it became Delta. And in Japan, she was in charge of Japan, and she was trying to get the Japanese customer service agents to go outside of their comfort zone. Basically, like, Nordstrom's, like, do whatever you can to satisfy guest needs, right? But the reverse happened in those situations where the Japanese customer service agents didn't have the risk taking or the confidence to go outside, because Japanese are trained from university, from school, to do what everybody else has done. You do what's been done before. You don't set a new precedent, right? And so in America, we consider good service as like, oh yeah, you went way beyond the call of what you were supposed, that was what you normally would do. But in Japan, they do what is the precedence best, better than anybody, I believe, in the world. But if you want them to go outside, so if you have a request that's outside one of the precedents that has never been done before, then you may not be able to get that to happen for you. Or it may not be able to, it'll be a huge process of going to the supervisor. So again, I just want to make sure that, when I say that they have great service, it's within the bounds that they have done it before. They are the best at that. But anything that's new, like, getting something like you request, a lot of, Westerners or foreigners like to request something, different. Be prepared that that may not happen. And it's not because they don't want to give you good service. It's the culture is not used to stepping outside of the bounds. So again, the idea of omotenashi. And people are just nice and helpful. Lots of times it's a language issue. It's not like anyone is trying to, like anyone's unfriendly or not friendly. It's more about they feel more either shy, or they feel a little bit intimidated about trying to speak English, or they feel they cannot. So they're maybe more standoffish. But they all want to help. Most of them, at least 99%, I think, believe they want to help if possible, especially the people who work in there. But if they just don't have it, so it's sometimes it's a language issue. It's not a thing about they want to help or not to help. It's about the language. And as I said before, before, it's like if you don't speak Japanese, you can just smile and point to your phone if you're going to go somewhere, or use gestures. Gestures are quite amazing. Some people are just amazing at being able to convey through gestures. And remember, lots of times the words, you can say the English word in like a katakana pronunciation, like computer, computer, or glass, gurasu, or light, laito. I mean, not everything will hit, but a lot of times you'll be surprised that things will hit. So you could use those words with gestures, point to your paper or your iPhone, and just try to communicate. And once they feel comfortable with you, I think it'll be much much easier. Every once in a while you might meet someone in Japan who, like I met the imabari taxi drivers who I felt were rude or not polite. And so there are those people. I had another friend who met a taxi driver in Osaka, and it was raining, and he forced her to get out because he didn't know where it was, and he didn't speak Japanese. He was an old man, and basically yelled at her, made her cry. So again, they do happen, but they are not very very common. Yeah. So if you know of a place in the world that you get better customer service than Japan, please let me know in the comments because I would like to go there. Okay, so that's number two. Number three is like efficiency and orderliness. Now, efficient on certain things, right? Um, on certain things. So, but before I go into that, I'm just going to read a couple comments. Manhattan says, let's see. I admire Japan because the elderly enjoy weeping outside their little houses and the little garden that they have in front of their little houses and alleyways. And yes, I feel safe walking at night. Yes. Okay. So, and also, let's see, what else did she say? Okay, Manhattan, thank you. I love how when you buy something in the shop, they count out the change old school. They keep using their brain rather than using the cash machine. That is true for a lot of places who don't take credit cards, or it's still basically a cash-based society. As much as people use credit cards, like I still carry cash, and you have to carry quite a bit, right? Like 30,000, sometimes up to 50,000, depending on what you're doing, because it's safe, so you're not worrying too much about carrying cash. But also, some things cost more than not. You just want to be ready, right? Okay, so orderliness, I mean efficiency. Japanese are, when it comes to like things like the Suica card or Icoca card, where you can use it for trains or sometimes most taxis or vending machines or convenience stores. It's different from a credit card where you just touch, boom, 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 and that is efficiency. Or I think the most efficient ticket accepting, like when you go into the station or you leave the station, those machines, I don't know even what you would call them, this they are the most efficient in the world, because anytime you go through, it's just whether you have the Icoca card touch or if you have a ticket, you put it in, it shoots out on the other end, you pick it up. Sometimes you have 2 tickets or 3 tickets and you can put them all in, and it's able to read within like 1 microsecond, and the ticket that comes out is the one that you're supposed to take with you, or it takes them all. It's that kind of stuff Japan has gotten down. So when Japan establishes some kind of system or some kind of scene, like machine or device, that's where they're at their best, right? New ideas come slow sometimes, but that kind of thing they do very, very well. Another thing like Takubing. Takubing is the delivery service, right? Takubing is the delivery service. It's like like it's I said before, I believe it's the best domestic delivery service of any country. It's fast, it's safe, it's quick, and it's cheap, at least for the size, because you can send up to large suitcases or heavy boxes. You just sometimes have to pay a little bit more if it's a little bit more, but they'll take big things, surfboards, golf clubs, and you can send it every day. And most places in Japan, it's one day. Maybe Okinawa and Hokkaido might be a little bit more, take a little bit longer, but for most places, it's one day. So where can you get that kind of service, that quick, that fast? That's, again, where Japan gets it. It's like nobody can beat them in the efficiency of Takubing, that kind of thing. Like, so yes, I always use Takubing in Japan, even when I travel. If I don't want to carry a heavy suitcase, and for those of you who are traveling, and you don't want to carry the suitcase, send it by Takubing. It takes overnight. It'll be there, except for the airport. I think it's at least 2 days. You have to make sure when you send to the airport, make sure that you send it in time, because they're very, very strict about that. But normally it's when you send it to another hotel from Tokyo to Osaka, it's usually overnight. So do check with the hotel people or whoever or the takubing people. I usually go directly to the takubing office, but you can do it at the hotel and things. So takubing, um, orderliness to be orderly. Let's see one thing before I go start. Oh yeah, the poor friend, the friend who got yelled at by the taxi. Really sad. That older man, he was mean to her. But anyway, orderliness, waiting in line. There's a lot of waiting in lines in Japan, right? I mean, and that's what I have to say. The Japanese are so good at waiting in lines. For me, I won't wait. And I even said that before, like, that's why when I go to a restaurant or somewhere and people are waiting, even if it's famous, I don't wait. I go to the next place because to me, I'm not a foodie. But Japanese are really good at waiting. They don't mind waiting, right? And I cannot. But again, very orderly, very weighty. Even at the train stations, right? They're all in line. You go to some countries, everyone's just rushing. It's crazy. But in Japan, everyone kind of respects. You wait outside until the people get off the train, and then they get on the train. Very, very orderly. I really admire and I really love that at least you know where to stand, you know what the process is, you don't have to rush or whatever, you know what everybody's going to do. And basically, Japanese are just good rule followers. So they follow the rules, which in the West, sometimes it's about breaking the rule, not breaking, but not in a bad way, but pushing it to see how far you can get. Most Japanese would just follow the rules, so everyone does what they're supposed to do, so things move quite slowly. Okay, another thing that I really love about Japan is that you don't see people getting upset or angry in public usually. You don't have people getting mad. People avoid conflict usually in public. They don't display anger or extreme emotion. Outside of people getting drunk, maybe you have a fight for a drug, people getting drunk, or you have some problem. It's more about people drinking, and that's what happens. But normally in Japan, showing anger is kind of a sign of weakness. Being in control is really the norm and the ideal. And again, most Japanese, they just want to get along. Nobody wants to be a troublemaker. I mean, sometimes you have those Yankee types. We call them Yankee types. They're the ones with the blonde hair, with sometimes they have like the red sunglasses or whatever, kind of look like Yakuza types. But they're called Yankee. They're the ones that seem to be like the troublemakers, the bad boys. But, there are not many of them. And they're not all like that. Some of them are really nice. I know a couple of them. But again, you just get that impression. You look at them, they're trying to be cool, they're trying to be tough, kind of thing. Those types, maybe there are more tendencies that there might be some problem. But normally, again, it's not like in the United States where there's a lot of conflict or people get mad or, it's so, again, Japan, that's one of the beauties of that. I mean, the whole point of Japan is this idea of harmony, right? The idea of harmony, to get along, to get along with people. That's what the Japanese have built their whole society on, this harmony. That's why there's a lot of television shows and they kind of play on the word W-A, meaning harmony. It's about that, to get along. So again, the idea to avoid conflict is another thing that I really like in Japan. You rarely have fights. I have 30 years in Japan, and how many fights have I seen? Zero. Yeah, zero. I'm thinking like I must have seen some fights, but no. I heard people yell a couple times at each other in a bar, but I have never seen an actual physical fight. Like, when I was in Alaska working at the state fair, I saw people like outside of the bar beating each other up. It was like crazy. But anyway, the next thing that I find that I really admire about Japan, and this is something that took me a while to get used to. I couldn't uh, understand at first. So a lot of Japanese would come to Hawaii when I was their friends and things, and I take them around, and they go, "We love Hawaii. Oh, we love Hawaii." So many. Oh yeah, I love Hawaii. And I said, "Oh, you should move," because at that time, this is like 30 years ago, a lot of people, Japanese, were immigrating to the United States, or they were trying to get the visa, the green card. And so I said, "Yeah, why don't you move? Or you can set up a business and you can, move, you know." And but all of them would say, "No, we love Hawaii, but we miss Shiki." Shiki, Shiki. Shiki means 4 seasons. So the Japanese love that 4 seasons. And for me, I'm thinking like, well, it's okay, but it's so hot in the summer and so cold in the winter. But it's not necessarily it's about those extremes. It's basically about the whole culture like changes, like food changes, drinks, alcoholic beverages change to the season. Everything is connected to the changing of the seasons. Your clothes change. Like, you wear long sleeve until right around now, we start switching to short sleeves at the company. Um, Everything will change, right? And the colors you wear are different, and the style of clothes you wear, even people's hair changes somewhat. Of course, it gets shorter when it's hotter. So, anyway, everything is connected to shiki. And when you think about it, it's the Japanese are very, because of big natural disasters they have, and they're an agricultural country, so they're very dependent on nature and natural changes. Even like with the cherry blossoms, the idea of ichigo ichie, like you only have this moment. The rice harvest festivals in the fall, are all built around this idea of nature, this idea of four seasons, and the Japanese are very embedded in shiki. I didn't even understand that, but now I kind of do. And it's not only like you think four seasons. It branches out to different areas. Like, I was living in Alaska for about seven years, and at that time, we did like a bed and breakfast in the winter, and we had like a viewing spot for the Northern Lights, for Japanese. I mean, for the winter tourist, and we had like a omiyage, like a gift shop, as well as we took pictures and things. I took pictures from there. Anyway, the Japanese were 99% of the market at that time. I hear these days, I haven't been to back to Alaska in a while, it's now Chinese, but at that time it was the Japanese. And they love to go and see the Northern Lights, the aurora they call it, right? Now, most Americans, if you ask, you want to go and see the aurora? Yeah, a lot of people say, yeah, I want to go, but it's dark and cold, so most people probably won't go. But the Japanese have this connection, and they connect it to what is called Daishizen. Daishizen is like big nature. That's the word, or vastness of nature. And so the idea of seeing the Northern Lights in this cold and dark, kind of environment, where it's like sometimes moving. It's almost like the idea of nature, natural. And I think the concepts of wabi sabi. The idea of wabi sabi is the idea of where you love something because of its rustic quality, or that it's imperfect, the unbalanced T-bow. When you compare Ginkakuji to Kinkakuji, Kinkakuji is the golden pavilion, right? It's beautiful gold, very symmetric. And you go to Ginkakuji, where the new bus is now going, right? The express bus is going. If you don't know the background and you see Ginkakuji, the silver pavilion, you go and you go, oh, is that it? Because my first impression when I went many, many years ago was like, is that it? It looks like an old house. And basically, it is an old house. But it's this idea of wabi sabi. Wabi sabi meaning like this idea of the beauty in the imperfection. So a lot of Japanese will prefer Ging Kakuji, the silver pavilion, to the golden pavilion. But most foreigners, of course, because it's gold and it's symmetrical, will prefer the golden temple, or golden pavilion, excuse me. So again, that whole idea of nature, wabi sabi, I believe is connected to this whole concept of shiki, or four seasons. So the idea of Zen too. All of that is embodied, I believe, or embedded in the concept of shiki, and it just goes wide from there, to different Daishi Zen, to big vastness of nature. Okay, so the next one is, let's see. One time, let's see what Matt had to say. Conformity. Okay, Star said, let's see. Oops. Conformity is somewhat admirable. Yeah. So there's good and bad, right? Because at times, like even me, I'm a anti-conforming person. But on the other hand, it works here in Japan for most part, and it keeps 127 million people on a small landmass of 20% of California in check, and not people running crazy and killing each other. So I think, like, yeah, if it works, and so I guess it's hard to know when is it good to conform, when do you need to push the boundaries. And I think that's what Japan is still dealing, how to push the boundaries, or when to push the boundaries. And that's the transition that's happening in Japan now, I believe, but it's going to take some time. Okay, thank you, Star. Conformity is, I remember a Japanese professor once telling me, ware ware Nihonjin, we Japanese must conform. This is back 30 years ago. He was an old professor, Dr. Yoneda. He came to our university at Willamette University, and that was one of his words, ware ware Nihonjin. We Japanese must conform to be Japanese, is what he said. Food for thought. Let's see. What did you say? Okay, man. One time I left something at a service counter and I forgot it. I came back and the person took me to the lost and found place in the building and it was there. I couldn't thank her enough for help. Yes. And this is very common. For one thing is that people will not usually not take someone else's stuff. People don't take someone else's things. They respect the property. Also, lots of times in America, like if you leave your bicycle cord loose on your bike or something, people will take it just to steal it. They don't even have a use for it. It's not like they needed that bicycle cord or something. They'll just steal it, just to steal it. And that kind of thinking, it doesn't really exist in Japan, at least not now. And so that's why I really like Japan, that you could forget something. And especially like at a service counter, no one's going to take it usually. And they were nice enough to take you to the lost and found. That's why if you forget anything on the train, and I did a video about this and my red Columbia jacket and how I love that jacket. And then I left it on the train and then I didn't hear, I went back to check the first couple of days and it was gone. I said, okay, well, this is one of those cases that in Japan, it's actually gone 3 days after I reported it. They did call and it was there and I went to pick it up. There's a video there. And if you're interested, please, you can find it in my on my channel. So thank you, Manata. Yes, that's the beauty of Japan, is that there's a still respect for people's belongings, but also that people want to help you. People want you to be happy. I think a lot of Japanese, they want, especially foreigners when they come, they want foreigners to have a great experience in Japan. They're proud of Japan. It's just like I'm from Hawaii. When people come to Hawaii, I want them to have the greatest experience in Hawaii, right? That's why when it rains every day and they're there, I feel so sad and sorry for them. We can't do anything about it, but because I am proud that I'm from Hawaii and I want them to love Hawaii. Japanese are the same. Let's see. Irasima says in Japan. Oh, okay. Mr. Irasima, number one. In Japan, do you see a large disparity rich and poor? Not very much, not like the United States. However, 30, 40 years ago, Japan was considered like almost all middle class. And that's why it was so powerful right after the big, the economic miracle. Today, you see this going like this. And it's because, you have a lot more people, it's getting much wider. You have a lot more people on the lower end. Like I was just watching on the news last week, and they're talking about a lot of people going to like food banks. Now before, food banks was almost non-existent. It was for the really like the homeless. But today, and before, it was embarrassing. It was shameful that you would have to get food from a food bank. But today, people are doing it, out of necessity. People are on the news. They're saying, yeah, I have to go to food bank because I don't have enough food for my 2 kids or whatever it is. So yes, it is changing. And I think it has to do with the whole economic situation. Japan will have to go through a lot more hardship before it gets better. Nobody wants to admit that. And that's why the yen is hurting now. I think it's going to be a while. Before I thought it was going to bounce back. But now the more you see, the longer it's going to take. And so the yen is going to, I believe, is going to be down at least for this year until December, maybe even longer. But because economically, they want to give more pay raises, which they are now. Remember, Japan had never given pay raises for the longest time, like I think 20 or 30 years. Well, very little. And so what has happened was they were just like stagnant, right? But that's why Japanese prices were good. They were all the same. It never changed in like 10 years, 20 years, right? It's only recently it's been affected. They're raising the prices so they can pay more. Also, inflation has hit too, so prices are going up. I used to buy something at 100 yen. Today, it's about 160 yen. But that's part of the whole thing. Where other countries, they were paying more, so their prices were going up. So Japan is finally getting around to it. But I worry about Japan is that they're no longer the manufacturing giant like they were back in the 80s, right? Now they're more of a service industry. It's the manufacturing power that they had, the big they could get the big, what they call benefit as far as they be in the black, not the red to other countries. Today, Japan is in the red as a trading partner, when before they were, even if you have Toyota and Toyota is doing very well, they cannot hold up the entire country. And so that's what's going to go on. So yes, there is a gap is widening. And so they're still trying to keep it together, right? The government is trying to give subsidies to people who are less fortunate, and they're trying to do their best, but they're still struggling really, really hard. So um, I worry that in the next 2, 3 years, it's still going to be rough for Japan, whether not only the yen, but the people themselves. So, you know, and with the yen rate the way it is, you're not going to see a lot of Japanese people traveling, except, the more wealthy. So for those of you, again, as I said the other week, in Hawaii or wherever that normally gets a lot of Japanese tourists, and you're in the United States or in a country where your currency is strong, you won't be getting many Japanese because they can't afford it. They'll probably go to domestic travel. And that's why they travel domestically, which means that sometimes it's more crowded for you if you're coming to Japan because they can't travel outside because of the yen rate. So they stay home and travel, which then makes it more crowded for you who are coming from the outside in. So there's also that going on too. Okay, thank you, Irasima. Good to see you. Thank you. Let's see. Star wrote, let's see. Very limited immigration, so people are all the same and easy to control, shelter. Economically, Japan is suffering. Yes. Yeah. Immigration is a big, big problem. This is my own opinion, so not, the government doesn't think this. Japan has to open up to immigration, and they have to let in, because they're so strict now, and they just changed their visa. They had an intern visa, which someone could come and make money and supposedly learn as they stayed here. And I think it was up to 5 years, and they would have to go home. They just changed that visa, and I just saw it 2 nights ago. And now it's going to be called. There's a different name for it, but I think that it was like 3 years, but they could renew it every year, and I guess they could stay as long as they could continue to renew it. You see, the problem in Japan is, I'm going off the topic about what I admire, but I think this is more important because those of you who are on the comments are listening, and I think then I'm going to address what you have to, if you have questions on. The problem about Japan and the immigration is that the Japanese government does not want people to stay forever. They want you to come and, for example, even to study abroad, to come and study. They want you to come and study, but they want you to go home. And they want you to come and work and add and help like the agricultural or the CNAs and things, but they want you to go home. So people don't have the motivation. I mean, like people who want to come or they want to immigrate somewhere, they might be thinking, well, maybe I'll go to Canada because after 3 years, maybe I can get a kind of a temporary permanent visa and then maybe eventually become a citizen. People are thinking differently. Japan is, it's the island mentality. I call it sakoku. Sakoku is like isolation period. Remember from what was it, for 250 years, 1603 to 1868, I think, 1858, I think it was, when they went into isolation, Tokugawa. I believe, my theory is that kind of thinking still remains in a much lesser degree, of course, but the idea of protecting the country. But by doing that, they don't let people come in and work long periods, or you can't stay long. So, and this was a common thing, and I'm going to go a little bit off subject here. It was about, there's a university called Tsukuba University. It's a national university. It was supposed to be like the new MIT. This is back in the 1970s and 80s, I think it was. Everybody had big hopes for it. In fact, the campus exists about maybe like 30, 40 minutes outside of Tokyo by train. Beautiful campus. It was designed like a kind of like a Western American style. Huge campuses, bike paths all over. It's green. It's beautiful. And the idea was they were going to make it like Silicon Valley. That was the hope. That big companies would come in and people would come to study and they would stay. The problem is that when students came on a lot of times scholarships from the Ministry of Education and things, and they would study, they wanted to stay or they wanted to teach or they wanted to do research, there wasn't a position. there weren't positions for them. So Japan basically said, "Thank you for coming and iterashai, go back. It's time for you to go home." And so a lot of those trained, postdocs or graduate students left Japan and they went to the Singapore, they went to the United States, or they went to Germany because people would pick them up. They were trained and taught here in Japan, but yet they couldn't stay because Japan didn't have a system, because the overall thinking of sakoku is not to have people stay longer than they want. No, they're not offering, please make Japan your home and stay forever kind of thing. No, that's not here. And that is part of the problem. So all the students that Japan trained, like at Scuba and things, they left, most of them. Very few got any teaching positions left here. So they left. And when they went to, wherever, Singapore, they're probably there right now, like all over. Those countries benefited. I'm sure those countries were just saying, yeah, please, we're waiting. Yeah, just send them this way. But because Japan was so uptight about that, so what happens is Scuba never developed into the so-called Silicon Valley that they wanted. And remember, the big key here is diversity. Japan needs diversity. But if you send everybody out after they get trained, how can you increase your the diversity component? And so that's why immigration is so important for Japan. And of course, when you open up the gates, you're going to have good and you're going to have bad. You might have drugs, you might have other things, you might have human trafficking, you might have a lot of things. So again, the Japanese don't know how to handle all of that, and so basically it's just shut it down. Just keep the pipeline, keep the pipe really small. That has to change, and I don't know how long it's going to take. And that's why even with this new visa, they don't say, oh, we're opening up immigration. They give it another name, like a code name, so like the population itself won't get all upset, like, why are you letting in so many immigrants, or these people are bad people. I don't know exactly, but yes. So immigration is a key point, that the only way Japan is going to increase the diversity. And remember, I read this article about Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley, the reason that it is there in the United States is because of the diversity of Silicon Valley. In fact, a lot of times first, second generation immigrants are working at Silicon Valley. And they're going to live in America forever. That's their home. They are invested because that's going to be their home. Japan has not been willing to do that. And that's, I believe, a major problem. But again, the thinking is still very island sakoku thinking. Again, that's my opinion. So, the government doesn't really think that. Okay. So, later, what is, okay, I'm going to go, sorry, I'm going off track of what I was going to say, but this is probably more important anyway. Let's see. Bladesworth Harbinger. What is the attitude towards people with mental illness in Japan? Oh, good question. Tough question. Before, people with mental illness were kind of kept hidden. They're kept away. They're kept in asylums. The whole idea of being embarrassed or shamed that my brother or my friend or whoever was mentally ill. So that system in Japan has never really developed that well. And that's why even till today, they still have problems with enough mental health doctors and counselors and supporters. It has increased very much compared to it was 30, 40 years ago, which was almost non-existent, but it's still very, very limited. And the idea of how advanced it is, I don't know, but personally, I wouldn't go to a Japanese if I had a choice, because I think that they're more advanced, like that's in the United States or maybe outside of Japan. So again, I think that's an area that really has to develop. But people have become a little bit more tolerant and understanding about mental illness. They have tried to, the idea of depression, that's still a tough one, but more and more people are, they call it utsubyo, the idea of like depression from work, or, some people have it when they have their change in their life or whatever. It's more understood and accepted somewhat, but there's still like kind of a kind of pushed to the side. So it's still very hard. So I would say Japan has a long way to go when it comes to this whole mental illness and this whole idea. And you have that, like, a lot of stuff going on in Japan, right? You have that huge number of students who don't go to school. I can't remember the Japanese name, but they're ones who, along the way, before, whether it's high school, elementary school, or junior high school, they said, I'm not going to school. Whether they were bullied, a lot of them were bullied, they just stopped going. And so they just stay at home. And the parents don't know what to do. And the society in general, they don't know what to do, right? And so those kind of issues are very common. But no one will talk about it. If your son or your daughter is one of those students, you're not going to go out into the neighborhood and talk about it, right? So again, there's a sense of shame in some ways, but yet at least it's slowly kind of opening, but it's still so they really need to really vamp that strong. In fact, just last night on the news, they were talking about criminals or people who were indicted who were getting this assessment from a psychologist, and they found out that the psychologist wasn't interviewing people but making a decision, and then they were criticizing that psychologist, and he came on the news. He was not, his face was blurred out, but he said, I don't have time because there's not enough professionals to do this, so I had to just make a decision. So that kind of gives you the hint that there's not enough medical health professionals in Japan, and they need to have much more advanced training in Japan. It's still very, I don't want to say, I don't think it's as advanced as in the, let's say, the Western countries. Okay, thank you, Blay. Thank you very much. I hope that helps. That's not a good explanation, but irasema. Is the attitude about immigrants of Japanese descendants, Americans, Brazilians different at all from that of with other historic countries? Okay, that about immigrants of Japanese. Okay, so like we call them Nikkei-jin, right? Japanese Brazilians, Japanese Peruvians, at all from that with no historic connection to the country. Good question. So it's really kind of, it's a little bit tricky, this one, because even among Japanese descendants, like I am Japanese American, I speak English. I can teach English, although sometimes it's hard to get a job because of my face. But English is considered put on a pedestal, right? You're an English speaker. So let's say I'm going to graduate school. I can get a job teaching English. This is back 30 years ago, right? Making 3,000 or 4,000 yen an hour, which was good at that time for a graduate student, okay? If you are Japanese Brazilian or Japanese Peruvian, you speak Spanish and maybe some Japanese. There's no Spanish teachers needed at that time, at least. And so those people end up working in washing dishes or doing more manual labor. They're getting, at that time, they were getting paid like 450 yen. So among the Japanese descendants, on what country, if you're from Canada or United States or maybe even UK, not many in UK, you were a privileged group within that group. And if you were from Brazil or Peru or Bolivia, you had a much harder time. In fact, a lot of those Japanese descendants worked in factories, and they worked all together. So a lot of them, there's little almost like little towns where they lived all together, and there were like shops that sold their food, like Portuguese food or whatever they ate. But again, they never really assimilated that well because they were kind of enclosed. And so there were, I would say, bias and discrimination towards them in a way. Although they could come easier than any other non-Japanese because they are Japanese, they could come to Japan on the visa, the working visa, because if you are a child of a national, then you have, like me, I came in originally on the Japanese Nikkei visa. It's called child of a national. They could come, and that's how they could come in and they could work. So that was an advantage for them compared to others. However, once they come in, then the actual job itself is a little bit different. They can do, basically, they're limited to more labor or factory work. They don't get that much high paying jobs, not like maybe some of the English teachers, some people are going to business. So yes, there's that. And again, it's all about how you look, right? I mean, if I was Caucasian white, I'd be more marketable, I mean, realistically, than having a Japanese face. I could tell you tons of stories when I first came, how difficult it was to get a job and how I could even sense it when I went to the interview already. Once they saw me, it was like, oh, thank you, but no thank you. I could feel it. But again, you can't change the way you look, right? So it's like playing poker, right? You can only play the cards that you have. So And there are times that I was happy to look like how I am because I could just be on the train in disguise. I'm in camouflage, right? And I could listen to people around me talking and no one was like looking or staring at me, right? So, it can work for you too. But let's see. Okay, I hope that helps. See my number one. Futoko. Star wrote Futoko. What is Futoko? I'm not sure what Futoko is, Star. Maybe you can write me. So anyway, again, one interesting thing about the Japanese, the national, the Japanese Peruvian, Brazilians, especially Japanese Peruvians, is you almost have like a reverse thing. Okay, so think about this. The first generation, their grandparents or parents, they moved to Peru or Brazil. Brazil has 2 million Japanese Brazilians, right? They're the largest outside of Japan. And I just interviewed a gentleman from Peru, Carlos, which I'm gonna put the video up sometime in the next week. If you're interested, it's gonna be on. He was talking about Japanese Peruvians, and there are 250,000 Japanese Peruvians. But anyway, what happens is, so work is tough in Brazil and maybe in Latin America. So some of them, the second generation that are born there, that mainly speak only Spanish, and some of them speak some Japanese, they all come back to work in Japan. So eventually they come back and they have children and they stay here for a long time. They have children. Their dream is just like their parents' dream was when the first generation went to Hawaii or America, 100 and 130 years ago, or to Peru or to Brazil, was many of them, the majority, wanted to make money, save money, come back to Japan, buy a nice house, or be quite wealthy if they could come back. That was the dream, which for most people never happened because they never, they were doing labor. They never were able to save that much money, which then they get married, they have their second generation children who learn the language of that country, who have never seen or know Japan. So those Brazilians, let's say, and Peruvians, they come back to Japan to work, but there's an opportunity to work, so they come back to Japan to work. Well, they come back to Japan, they work in the factories or whatever, they get married, they have children, and they want to save money. They want to go back. So the first generation wanted to go back to their homeland, which is Japan. The second generation, born in Peru and Bolivia, and even for Japanese Americans back 50 years ago, their dream is, I'm sorry, the second generation in America, they didn't really come to Japan. But let's say the Japanese Peruvians, and they come to Japan. Their dream is to go back to Peru or Brazil because that's their homeland. But they have children, third generation, right? And their children now know Japan. They don't know Peru or Brazil, and their children want to stay. So it's really kind of like, wow, like they go over the first generation, they want to come back, they have children, the children don't want to leave, they end up staying, but the children get, they get old and they have job opportunities. So they come to Japan and then they stay a while, they have children, and they want to go back to Peru or Brazil, but then their children don't want to go because they only know Japan. So there's also that going on, and it's like, wow, especially with South America, like Bolivia, Peru, and even Argentina and Brazil. And anyway, okay, thank you. Sorry, I didn't mean to go off on that. Sorry, I really talked. Oh, hikomori. Okay. Let's see. Star asks about reverse discrimination. I don't have time today, but one day I will tell you the story of reverse discrimination because of me looking like I am and feeling like, I'm American, but when I go back to America or when I was in Alaska working, I was like the only Asian person, like in the whole, like in every place I went mainly, or, and I felt kind of like I was never American, right? Or in Japan, when they're looking for English teachers and I go in to apply, it's not my face they want. This face is not going to be on any English school brochure. It's not going to be in any video, and I won't go there today, but I have so many stories about how this worked against me, but yet it's just interesting because impression is everything. First impression. How you look really makes a difference, especially in Japan, and especially for when you hire English teachers. I am on the worst of the food chain. Male and looking Japanese face and Japanese name, I'm on the bottom of the food chain. But anyway, that's a whole nother story. But thanks for asking. Star wrote about, the name of those children who stay home are called hikikomori. And they're the ones, there's thousands. I don't even know the count. There's thousands that are in Japan that whether they were bullied or they were taken advantage of or whatever, or they just don't want to go, they just stop going to school. And I never heard of this in the United States. Like people just say, okay, I'm not going to school. Well, maybe in America they do homeschooling. I don't know. In Japan, the parents are troubled and frustrated. They don't know what to do. And I have a friend whose daughter has been a hikikomori child for like 30 years. Now that child is like 38 or something. And he doesn't know what to do because she doesn't work. She just stays in her room and stays home. So he worries like, what happens when they die? Who's going to take care of her? So there's a whole nother thing to that hikikomori social issue also. So, okay, I'm not going to go too much, but I'm just going to mention a couple other things. I'm not going to go into them, but the last things I'm going to mention that I love about Japan is convenience. You know, the convenience stores, the takubing, public transportation, toilets. You know, I know this sounds funny, but I'm kind of a toilet person, meaning that I always kind of worry, like, if there's a toilet around, right? Well, Japan has toilets, you know, a lot, everywhere, right? And all convenience stores, well, 99.9, there are a couple that don't let you use their toilet or don't have. 99.9% have toilets. That's their selling point. If you look, when you're driving around and you see a big convenience store with a big sign, and they have the female and male sign of the toilet because they're saying stop here and use the toilet, and basically they hope that you'll buy something. So yes, I love that about Japantrip. It's very convenient. Another thing is, let's say I live in a rural community. I live 30 minutes outside of Kyoto, between Kyoto City and Nara, and it's a rural area. But on my bicycle now, within 10 minutes, I can go to the supermarket. There's 3 supermarkets: post office, bank, dry cleaning, gym. Every place can be going. So convenience. So a lot of times, different small towns, or even, you know, like this is a small rural area, has everything within a radius where you can get through by bicycle. I think that's very convenient. Yeah. Punctuality. The Japanese king of punctuality. You know, of course, trains run on time, and even buses, which not always, but a lot of the time. How do buses run on time when you don't know what traffic or traffic light you're hitting or whatever? But for most part, they are on time. Other things like never being late for meetings. People are never late for meetings. You know, a lot of times in America, I remember when I was there, people come, you know, like wandering in or looking at their phone coming in. In Japan, you are there on time. I go to the company, right? Like tomorrow I'll go again, and we have this 8 o'clock meeting of all the managers, like 35 managers or whatever. Everybody is there on time every single week. Nobody is late. Nobody comes wandering in. Oh, sorry, I took a phone call. Everybody is there on time. And so even when you go out as a business, you go to another business, you are always on time. It is be rude to be late. On the other hand, you don't want to be too early. So if your meeting is at 10 a.m., you don't go at 9:50. You wait to 1 or 2 minutes right before 10 to go in. But you're never late, but you don't go too early. You know, there's this whole dance you have to do, and I don't even really know it that well. So a lot of times people, or like myself, I will go early, find where it is, and go downstairs, and they'll have coffee or they'll rest until the time, and they'll time it so they get to the place just 1 to 2 minutes before. Again, you don't want to be too early. Even 5 minutes might be too early. So you want to make sure that you are there just on time. And it happens every single day. You know, it's just a common thing. Even among friends, people are always on time. That's why the foreigners are usually the ones that are late, because they're just like running around. Usually a lot of them are late. But there is one place that the Japanese are not punctual. And this to this day amazes me. It's at the university. Students at the university don't seem to care if they are late. They're always on time in high school, junior high school, elementary. But the moment they get to college, I don't know what happens. they come in late, or they just stumble in. And you know who else is late? A lot of times it's the professors. They don't seem to respect time in the university. Also, a lot of them, not all, a lot of some of them are fine. And then when I ask the students, well, how come you always come late to the so and so's class? They go, well, the professor is always late, so we must also come late. When I ask the professor, how come you go? Oh, the students always come. They blame each other, and they use it as an excuse why they're gonna be late, because if I come early, they're gonna come late anyway. It's kind of crazy. It's ridiculous, I thought. But anyway, that's the only place in Japan that people are not punctual. You know, and again, as I said, everything starts on time. Even if it's like a party or whatever, when it hits that time, they want to be ready to start on time. No one is like delaying it or starting early, but they start on time. So it's very, very, if you attend anything in Japan, make sure you're on time. And, like if it's to a reception, you want to be a little bit early, more than 1 or 2 minutes. You want to be a little bit early, just, around. I have also been trained, and now I just automatically move. I was always late. I'm from Hawaii, right on Hawaii time. I was late to everything. Now I've been trained that I'm there early. I usually check out the place, and then I kind of have coffee or I wait on the side, but I'm always on time. I don't want to be, break the rule or whatever. In fact, it was funny. I met my friend Masaki. He's Japanese. I did that video about him, living in America longer than he lived in Japan. I met him last year in Kyoto, and we met at 5 or whatever. I was early, 4:50 I was there. Masaki was late. It was funny because the Japanese person was late. He's been Americanized. And the American who's been Japanized was early. It was kind of the reverse. But anyway, just going there. Okay. So a couple of last things. I'm going to end pretty soon already. Work ethic. I think that there's a strong work ethic in Japan. It's, even at a simple thing, I'm always watching like at the toilet. You got these guys at the toilets who clean the train station toilets, who that's not the best job, right? And it's busy, and it gets dirty easily. They're in their little uniforms with their little hat and everything, and they're cleaning away. And there still seems to be like a sense of pride. It's not like, oh, this is a job that I shouldn't be doing. There's still a sense of pride of what they do, and I really respect that. I go, wow, that's great. Every time I see them, I say, "Otsukare-sama deshita," which you don't say normally, but I do, because I go like, yeah, these guys are working in this kind of situation, and they're still, in a sense, proud of what they do. So yes, work ethic and sense of pride of what they do. You see it at the airlines too, right? If you go to America, I'm sorry, I'm using America a lot. I'm American, so you're in group. You can say, right? So you go to like the Los Angeles airport, and then you see the Delta people who are, whether they are the wheelchair pusher guys or they are the baggage people. They're just sitting around, a lot of them, just kind of like whatever. You never see that in Japan at any airport. You will never see people just, I don't use the word relaxing or slacking, but you never see that. So again, there's a whole different sense of when you work kind of thing in Japan, and that I admire. I think that's it. Patience, cooperation, humility, being humble, huge, 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 right? I mean, you look at Otani-san. I watch him on the news, and he gets interviewed by the Japan press every night. Always humble, always, like, oh, I got to do better, very, very different from a Western way of talking. Or so I like that. I'm Japanese American. Maybe I was raised with that. My dad was very humble too. Very, he I guess the DNA is in me. But so yes, I respect that a lot too. One thing that Matt Hatta had written earlier was about like older people. Yes, the idea of oyakoko, filial piety, taking care of your parents, is a very, very strong concept from Confucianism, and it's very, you see it in Hawaii a lot, probably because there's a lot of Asian Americans in Hawaii. Of course, in America, you have people who, of course, take good care of their parents too, but the tendency is a little bit different. They go into a home, or they put them in a home, but in Japan, it's this feeling that not only the oldest son. Before, it was more like the oldest son had to. In some rural areas, it's still like that, but the kids are supposed to help take care of their parents. Instead of sending them to a senior home, at least not until the end, you're supposed to do your best to take care of them. So this idea of oyakoko, very, very important in Japan. Taking responsibility in Japan. But let me see. Is there anything else? They already accepted the universe. The Japanese work from their hearts. They have pride in a job they accept. Okay, I think that's part of it. I think really that's part of it. Walk, just wait for the lights. Japan, never understaffed. Yeah. And as Star says here too, in some sense, maybe Japan is overemployed. And maybe the logic there is that's why the service is so good because they have so many people running around. That could be. I'm not sure. Or, but yes, a lot of times, like if you go to like Kicks, the airport, and I'm at Delta, I'm flying out, and then you look how many people are there. They're like at the gate, there's like 12 people, the ladies bowing, and everybody has a job and they're doing. I'm going like, wow, that's a lot of people because in America it's one or two, right? Two usually, but sometimes even one gets everybody on the plane. So there it could be some logic and sense to that maybe Japan is overemployed and that they need to think about efficiency. But I will agree. I talked about efficiency of machines, takubing. In 3 weeks, I'm going to talk about the things that frustrate me. And the reverse of the efficiency for that is the inefficiency of the work office situation. Like if I go to the city hall here and I see so many people and I think like, wow, do you need that many people for such a small town or city? And it's in a way, I think personally, Japanese offices, a lot of them are like 70% efficient at best, more like 60, I think. Again, I don't know, I'm just guessing, but just the feel of watching, I'm going like, and working in an office now, I understand like what people are doing. So very different work styles, very different training styles, and I don't know if that will ever change in Japan. Might be another 10, 20 years, but they really need to work on the efficiency. But again, nobody knows what's inefficient. That's the problem, right? And you don't want to call someone from the outside in because people like to have things done internally, which probably is not possible at this point in Japan. Yeah, their employment is actually quite low. So, again, my whole point of all of this is what I admire about Japan is the Japanese people. And when you travel, and a lot of you who already come to Japan, you know that it's not about the Shinkansen, and then the bullet train, or Mount Fuji, which is beautiful. It's just that supports what wasn't it? What's her name? Angelo, Maya Angelou, who said, "It's not what you did or what you said; it's how you made someone feel." Well, that's what I believe is in the people of Japan, is that it's how they make you feel when you left. And so these are some of the qualities I think of Japanese people. Of course, kind, they're thoughtful and considerate. They're usually humble and modest. They're polite, they're punctual, they're hardworking, and there's a sense of honor, still. Yes, you have crooked people, you have crooked politicians and stuff, but there's still a sense of honor of doing the right thing. Even though, like, when there's a problem with some company and they did something wrong, they all bow and it looks just like checking the box and they're just going through the motion. But there's still a sense like, okay, it's our responsibility. We need to take it, even though it kind of looks fake at sometimes. But again, there's that. And, that sense of honor of doing the right thing. Like I know in the United States, when I see sometimes, some people come up with their alternative world of facts, that kind of makes me like, what? Like you cannot have two different set of facts, right? In Japan, although you still have crooked politicians and you have problems, you have bribery, you have this, but still people know right is right. I mean, that they still have a North Star. I think United States is going through a big issue with that right now, but I think Japan still has that. So that's what I like about Japan, a sense of responsibility. There's a sense of honor yet. And Japanese want to help. It's just sometimes the language. And again, their personalities, they're more shy, they're more quiet. So they're not going to reach out. Remember, Japanese don't know how to do small talk. That's not a thing in Japan. Strike up a conversation. Like in America, you could be standing in the supermarket line and strike up a conversation with the front one person or talk to the cashier. That almost never happens in Japan. So a lot of times, as I said the other 2 weeks ago, if you need help, just ask someone, just smile and ask, and maybe if they say, oh, I cannot, then, ask somebody else. But most people are not going to be rude or going to get mad. Just keep asking. I ask, like when I'm going somewhere, sometimes 3 different people, because I want to make sure I get to where I'm going, right? Okay. Only okay. Erasa wrote, interesting. Okay, um, only outsiders see things that locals take for granted. Yeah, that's true. That's very true. You cannot see the forest from within the trees, right? That's why Irasama Ichi. Irasama Ichi. I really believe I'm like the best person to tell the Japanese government what they need to do, but they would never listen to me. But I really think that I have been here 30 years, right? I speak some Japanese. I understand kind of the value system and the philosophy. I don't agree with everything, but I understand it. I would be the perfect person to tell them what they need to do. Continuous improvement. They need to make me Minister of Continuous Improvement of Japan. Let's see. I can't wait for the live. Thank you for sharing the other side. Yes. Any country 20%. Yeah, 20% to 80% of the work. I guess that could be true too. Thank you, Star, for participating so much. I also very special when in Japan. It's almost like a TV show. They make us foreigners feel like a sorry. Yeah, no matter what, foreigners, especially if you look like a foreigner, whether you're white or non-Asian. Sometimes with Asians, like even myself, they don't know how to treat you. But if they know you're a foreigner, you get put on a pedestal in a way, which is really nice. Japanese want you to like Japan. They want you to be happy in Japan, and and they're happy when they're able to interact with foreigners. As I said 2 weeks ago, most of these Japanese, even if they studied English 6 years, some 8, 10 years, have never spoken to a foreigner outside of maybe in their university there was a foreign teacher, maybe. But for most part, they've never spoken to a foreigner, but they've studied it. If they could use even a few words, it would make them feel so good. For example, at my office, I check in with one of my bosses, and he told me, he said, "Oh, I have never spoken to any foreigner, so I'm so happy." And we're just messaging, "Hi, I'm checking in. Today's a warm day," whatever. Simple things, and that's the thing about Japan. Simple things make people happy. So much easier than making foreigners happy, right? Or Americans happy. Americans want like the sky, right? You can make a little rice ball for a Japanese and give it to them like when we're in Alaska. They're so happy. Simple things in Japan. I like that too, where things are simple. You don't have to do some big Broadway show to make someone happy. You can give them a little rice ball, right? Okay, I'm exaggerating, of course, but yes, and that's the beauty of Japan. It's much more simple. Life is simpler. And so yes, I enjoy that part too. In 3 weeks on Tanabata, July 7th, I will do another live. And even if there's only one person or two, or it's just several of you, thank you for coming today. And I think I would do it like this. The people who come to the live, if you bring your questions, I will do my best to try and answer them. And if not, other people in the live will answer like I saw what was going on. That's exactly what I want. I want people to talk among themselves because I don't know all the answers. I'm just giving you, and it's only my opinion, right? So in 3 weeks, July 7th, Tanabata. Do you know Tanabata? Tanabata is 7-7. It's a good luck day. And children write wishes on these little cards and they hang them up on bamboo poles, and they're supposed to be like to make them come true. And anyway, it's called Tanabata. It's kind of a good luck day in Japan. But anyway, that's Sunday, July 7th in Japan. So for most of you, it's going to be July 6th if you're outside of Japan, or if you're in America or in Hawaii and east of Japan. So thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you, Star, Erasma, Matt Hatta, everybody. Who else? If I missed you, I'm sorry. Ibrahim, thank you again. Thank you for all being part of this. I hope to see you again in 3 weeks. And if you have people who might be interested in knowing about what frustrates Mike Matsuno about Japan, tell them to join us in 3 weeks, and hope to see you then. Thanks so much. Really appreciate it. And have a great weekend. It's getting warm in Japan. Oh, rainy season. It's just starting in Kyoto, probably this week, probably tomorrow, which is really late. So it was cool for a long time. So, people say, oh, don't go during rainy season. Well, rainy season, this is already what? The 16th here in Japan. It hasn't hit yet. So, and it's gotten a little warm. Like today it's about 34, so 90s. It's getting hot the last couple of days. But again, It hasn't been the rainy season. The only place I said before in videos not to come, not where to go during rainy season is Okinawa. Okinawa gets the real rainy season. They get bombarded and they're getting hit really bad this whole last couple of weeks. You don't go to Okinawa during rainy season. You might want to go to Hokkaido, which doesn't have a rainy season, or Honshu. You can play your luck. Like this year, not much rain at all. So again, anyway, have a great weekend. Nice talking to you. Thanks everyone. Oh, dry season in California. Great. Global warming. I don't know if that's good or bad. Maybe that's bad. Okay, Abraham. Okay, so thank you. Take care. Bye bye, everybody. どうもありがとうございました。